Good morning. Today we are starting chapter 5 in social studies, the fur trade. So we have our key terms that we're going to be using throughout the chapter. So let's look at our first one. The first key term is profit. What does it mean to profit? Andrea.
Profit. Now, the money gained from the sale of a good or service after all the costs needed to make the sale are subtracted from the amount received.
Yeah, so profit is the money that's gained from the sale of a good or service after all the costs needed to make the sale are subtracted from the amount received. So when you sell something, let's say you sell a video game and you sell it for $30. Is $30 your profit? No, because you have to factor in how much did I pay for that video game. Okay, you already spent money on it. So maybe you spent $20 on the video game because you got it on a Black Friday sale. And you're going to turn around and you're going to sell it to somebody for $30. What's your profit going to be, Peyton? $10. Peyton's all over this. He wants to make those profits. So the profit is not how much you get initially. You have to take away everything. So if you're going to bake a cake and decorate it for somebody's birthday and they're paying you for it, so they pay you $30, you go, wow, I'm getting $30 for this cake. That's awesome. But you have to take out how much all of the ingredients costed. Okay, the flour, the sugar, all of the stuff you needed to make the cake, you have to subtract those materials out of it. And then what you get back is your profit. Naveen.
Also a little bit for the time you spent.
So the time isn't a material. Mm-hmm. That's what they're paying you for. That's your profit is for your time. So that's a good point because you do put a lot of time into it, and that's why people charge more than what it costs them to make it. So they're charging for their time. So that's factored into that. You're right. Okay, our next one is a resource. Sam.
Like something taken from nature or something? Something that...
So if it's a natural resource, it has to come from nature. Yep, so it's something that you get from nature. So it's a source or supply, or of a useful material. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a natural resource.
Yeah.
Like it could be, so it could be like wood is a natural resource, or oil, or it could be something like fur. Fur isn't a natural resource, but it is a resource. So it doesn't come from nature like the wood, it comes from an animal, but it's a resource that you use. We don't use it as much these days, but think about wool from a lamb. They shave off the wool so we can make sweaters and have wool coats and stuff like that. That is a resource that we use.
So during the fur trade, do you know how much money like people made by trading fur?
I love that you're excited about this chapter. We're gonna have to read it and find out. No spoilers. No spoilers today. Okay, a fur trader. What is a fur trader? Paul.
Like a term used for European or American involved in the fur trade.
Yeah, it's a term used for a European or American involved in the fur trade.
Often refers to the person who's in charge of the trading post.
Yeah. And usually it's referring to that person in charge. So the fur trader a lot of times runs the trading post. The next one is a pelt. So we're not going to pelt somebody with this island ball. But what kind of pelt are we talking about? It's not the verb. This is a noun, a thing. Sam A.
Like the fur from an animal.
Yeah, it's an animal skin with fur on it. So those of you that are going to be that went deer hunting, if you got a deer, sometimes they take the pelt from the deer and people make a rug for on the ground, or they hang it on the wall. Back in the time that we're talking about with the fur trade going on, they would use that for their clothing. They would use it as blankets. So it was very useful to them, and it was very warm. A hunter. What is a hunter? Someone who hunts. What does that mean? So a hunter is the person back then, not today's days, because I've got 4 nieces who are all hunters, but back then it was usually a man. Thankfully, times have changed, and we know women can do more, and so can men. Men aren't stuck hunting. Women aren't stuck cooking. You can do where your interests lie. But back then, they were very segregated with their genders. So a hunter was a person, usually a man, who spent most of his time hunting or trapping animals. For food and for pelts. So if you were the hunter for your family, that would be what you do as your job. So think I'm a teacher as my job. I'm here every day, all day long. The hunter, that's their job. It's not like the hunters that we have nowadays who go out on the weekend, who might take a day off of work to go hunting. This was their full-time job. That's what they did. They went out and they hunted. So what is a guide? Paul.
Someone like who died, someone hired to help voyagers and travel to unfamiliar lands or through them.
Yeah. So it's a person hired to help the voyagers. I love how they put that term on there before we even get to it, but we're going to find out what the voyagers are. To help the voyagers and fur traders find their way through unfamiliar lands. So think about it. These fur traders are coming over. A lot of them were Europeans coming over. They've never been here before. It's all wild land. There's no maps. There's no roads. They're going through the woods. There's no trails that have been made yet. They're trying to find where to go. There's a trading post that I want to make it to. How do I get there? So they hire a guide who's from the area. It was usually an American Indian who knows the area because this is where they've lived all their life. They know how to get to the different places. They know the right ways to go. They know where the river is going to be too hard to cross and where to go down to a different place where they could walk across it. So they hired the guide to help them get through all of the wild lands because they had no idea how to do it. So the guides were very, very important to help people navigate through all of this unknown area. An interpreter. What is an interpreter, Anna?
A person who translates for people who speak different languages.
Yeah, a person who translates for people who speak different languages. So like I said, a lot of these fur traders were coming over from Europe. There's a lot of countries in Europe, they speak different languages. The Native Americans, the American Indians all spoke different languages. There was the Sioux, there was the Ojibwe, or the Dakota, the Ojibwe, some of the other ones that we've heard that were in the area. So they need somebody to help them communicate with each other. When you go to the trading post, you need somebody who can tell you, oh, they're willing to trade these 5 beaver pelts, but they want this in return. So they need that translator, the interpreter, to help them communicate with each other. Next, we have a clerk. What is a clerk? Anybody want to read it for us? Edward.
That's the man who day-to-day business at a clerk.
Yeah, it's the man who managed the day-to-day business at a fur trading post. So think about those trading posts. They need somebody to run it. They need somebody who's taking care of the money, who's taking care of the people and the supplies that are coming and going. So that's the clerk. The clerk is the person that's kind of behind the scenes doing all of the grunt work, doing all of the labor there. Then we have the voyager. Paul.
Workmen who perform the physical labor of the fur trade, including transporting beaver pelts, and trade goods by canoe.
Yeah, so it's the workman who performed the physical labor of the fur trade. Including, my pen is not working so well down here. Transporting beaver pelts and trade goods by canoe. So the Voyager is the one who would take they trade the beaver pelts for the flour or whatever it is they want. Well, what do they do with the beaver pelts? They want to sell them to the companies that are going to use them to get stuff from it. So people would use those pelts to make things. So they needed to be brought. So in today's world, it would be like the truck drivers who are hauling in the big semi trucks across the country, bringing stuff from place to place. Well, we didn't have those big semi trucks back then. We didn't have the roads back then. So they had the Voyagers who, instead of using the trucks, used the canoes. So they could go through the Great Lakes all the way out to that East Coast. So the Voyagers would use their canoes to transport the things back and forth. So think of the Voyagers like the truck drivers. They were the ones bringing things back and forth to the different places. But instead of trucks, they used canoes. So that is the end of our key terms for chapter 5. For my friends at home, I'm going to wish you a good day and hope you are all well. And we will hopefully see you next week.